You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome on, welcome all to episode 178 of Flipping the Birds. I'm Brian Cameron alongside Eric Reese, Zach Chavalella, and yeah, I mean,
right?
It's weird, right? I think the false expectation on our part was expecting them to just carry over what was a very long season into this new season and just pick up where they left off. But obviously, there's building blocks. There's a lot of things that have to be smoothing out. Eagles, they did prevail. They did win against the Patriots, but it was definitely a bit of a head scratcher, a nail biter, an anxious matchup per se. Yeah, I mean, let's get right to it, right? So we'll be recapping the game, then after that, we'll kind of segue into previewing tomorrow night's matchup against the Vikings. But speaking of Sunday, I mean, how did you guys feel overall about what was seen on Sunday?
It felt like a comeback victory in a game where I don't recall trailing. And if they did trail, it was obviously by maybe a field goal. But I honestly, right, they got close to coming up on us. I don't think we trailed during that entire game as far as, the score is concerned. But it felt like a comeback game because in the first quarter, you see the Eagles go up, 16-0. The second quarter was atrocious. And then the second half, you're riding on Jake Elliott and his foot, redeeming in that, missed extra point. And then the defense. And the defense, by the way, that forced, a few, turnover on downs. And came up with a big play at the end. I mean, shout out to Josh Jobe. But overall, it leaves a lot to be more to be desired than the right home about at the end of the day. But a win is a win, 25-20.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like a preseason game where the starters just kept playing. It didn't feel like one of the teams who was in the Super Bowl last season making their season debut. It felt like a bunch of guys who haven't played football in 7 months, touching grass for the first time. It just felt like nobody was on the same page, specifically talking about the offense at least.
Mm-hmm.
The defense was definitely a bit more well put together. And I think that's a lot of credit to Sean Desai. And then, I mean, also just Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, man. Like, I'm sure we'll touch on this a little later on, but I mean, holy shit. Are you kidding me? These guys can play. So it was rough to see Fletch go down when he did, but knowing that those young guys are in the side pocket, makes you feel and Fletch should be back. I'm not too worried about that injury long term from the sounds of practice, but all that just to say the defense all in all did very well. I know there's some secondary concerns, but the thing was the offense looked peewee. There's no two ways around it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to say it, right? They look very peewee. I was talking to Eric before the podcast, and I think it frustrated me that, the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, right? And every time you saw Kenny Gainwell run the ball, it was in the same direction, same formation. There was nothing creative about it, right? You didn't see Jason Kelce pulling and running to the side. You didn't see Lane Johnson flying out to the side. There was nothing creative. On top of that, you place the entire run game on the shoulders of Kenny Gainwell, which, again, credit to Eric for kind of putting this in perspective. I get it's a short week. Maybe we get a full-blown version of DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny on Thursday against a better team. But still, fans waited so long to see what we put together this offseason. What we put together this offseason was supposed to be a better version of what we had in Miles Sanders alone. We didn't give Rashad Penny because he was a healthy scratch. we only got 2 carries out of DeAndre Swift. We saw him line up. We saw Boston Scott line up, I feel like, more than we saw DeAndre Swift, which is very frustrating as well. And then it was a very, very rusty Jalen Hurts. It's weird. It kind of gave me a little bit of flashbacks to the Bucks and Eagles game in the playoffs where Hurts just couldn't break that defense. And you saw Dallas got it open multiple times, and everything just felt very forced. It didn't feel like they were letting the game come to them. It just felt like they were trying to make things happen that just wasn't there. It felt disorganized. Honestly, it just felt very disorganized. But it's a team that didn't play. The first team offense that didn't play in the preseason. Like, they got no reps in the preseason.
Yeah, it's almost. Oh, I apologize, man. Just to that they did in the preseason, I do think that at least one quarter in the final game would kind of get you those reps to maybe not be so cold entering the final stretch into the regular season. And maybe that is required. I know Sirianni is kind of second guessing his whole take and strategy to preseason, so maybe that's something you see in upcoming seasons. But yeah, like it's annoying to clearly see the biggest toy that you guys got, with DeAndre Swift, and it's just he gets what three touches, maybe 1 or 2 catches or targets even, and maybe 2-3 yards total in the entire offense. He got 19 snaps. I do know that approximate, but from what I was able to see with Gainwell is he almost managed about 4 yards to carry and 5 yards to catch. He was efficient, in his work. And you're right. We were talking about this before. I'm not too worried about Swift not taking, having a big role in that game, because partially you got to think that if you keep that running back room healthy, then you have a better opportunity of kind of exploding in a big game down the line. So I look at this Vikings game, if that was going to be the game where you test out Gainwell and you get his feelers out there, then maybe there's more of an emphasis on Swift against the Vikings.
Yeah, I think we've touched on this kind of a good bit. It's a very vanilla running scheme, kind of a vanilla offense overall. And it's one thing to do that in the first game of the regular season, but talking specifically about the running game, and this is really no insult to Kenny Gainwell, because Eric, as you laid out, he really did perform serviceably. But to run that kind of vanilla of a scheme with a guy like this is not a Derrick Henry who can turn a simple run scheme into big gains. This is not a prime Saquon Barkley. Kenny Gainwell is getting better and better each and every day, and I do think that he's going to be a quality player on this offense. He already is. Yes. But you can't feature him in a non-feature scheme, if that makes sense. Like that just seems like shooting yourself in the foot. And that's what happened to the Eagles quite often. And then as far as Jalen Hurts, I mean, we talked about it preseason. Like this is the guy who, at least from Philadelphia's perspective, Jalen's going to be mentioned in the same sentence of, for a long time going forward. Patrick Mahomes played 2 preseason games. He threw 17 pass attempts.
Right.
Jalen Hurts' preseason was non-existent. So, when you look at that going forward, damn right, Sirianni better be looking at the preseason regimen going forward. And credit to him for saying as much. It's not always easy, and it rarely happens that a coach is that thoughtful and considerate of switching things up, trying something new, especially for almost policy, if you will, that they've hammered hard so much in the past. I mean, we saw that with the Sixers for the past 3 years with Doc Rivers. Like, that just doesn't happen with every coach, where you get a guy who's ready to admit that he like that.
Yeah, like he messed up.
Yeah, that was everything we had with Chuck Fletcher.
Yeah, honestly, like listen, it takes a big person to be able to admit that something needs to be questioned, and this preseason strategy needs to be questioned. A lot of people knew that before this game, but more people know that now, and it seems as though the coaching staff understands that. And it's not going to be a problem again until next season because there's nothing they can do about it at this point. But if they do handle it differently going into next season, that's a positive. Moving that to the side because, again, it's no longer an issue. For this upcoming season, when you think about the fact that they had gone 7 months without playing real football, when you think about the fact that they were going up against Bill Belichick, who, yes, the Patriots are not the dynasty that they once were, but this is one of the top tacticians in all of football to this day, right? When you think about the fact that the weather conditions, and that's part of the game, do not get me wrong, this is not an excuse. We're not conducive. It does not excuse the game plan that was laid out on Sunday. However, it does lend me to believe that change is coming, that this isn't going to be what the Eagles appear going forward. And I think Thursday's going to be a big step towards that against this Vikings defense.
Yeah, and I think that's my big thing, right? Like, so obviously it's going to be a huge leap from what we saw on Sunday to Thursday, right? My only fear with the Eagles and the whole concept of not playing your starters in preseason, the whole concept of running this weird vanilla offense in the regular season against Bill Belichick, is I fear that the Eagles will at some point get to a point where they're too smart for their own good, where they feel like they're the smartest people in the room and they're outsmarting everybody, but truly they're just dumbing themselves down. You can't do that. This is a Super Bowl window that's wide open right now for you guys. The NFC, there's nobody that can really compete with you outside of the 49ers. You have something the 49ers don't. You have a perennial quarterback who could be a generational talent if you truly push him to his ceiling. So offensive side, right? I mean, there was some excitement on the defensive side, right? I mean, you guys kind of just alluded to it earlier. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, even Nakobe Dean at times against the run. We saw Darius Slay with a pick six. But Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, like, there can be no better feeling in the world than to know that we drafted these guys in back-to-back drafts without any concern, without having to do anything wildly crazy. We traded up for both of them, but we didn't give up the farm for it, right? For lack of a better term. But Jalen Carter, man, that kid is going to be nasty for years to come. I mean, he was just shoving the offensive guard left and right without any hesitation, without any pushback.
Yeah, his very first play in that game, he just was the welcome to the NFL moment, like upon arrival. Of course we're excited about Jalen Carter. Just the way that defensive line played, I thought they actually handled the run pretty well, especially for week one where nothing's guaranteed. You might think that you have a really good line, and then they're leaky, and it's just week one rust. But I think that was the strongest part, aside from probably our kicker, because you have to give a lot of credit to Jake Elliott and how he handled that game. How he actually adjusted too from missing again that extra point earlier. He just kicking bombs and successfully throughout the rest of the game. I don't think you win without Jake Elliott. But back to the defense, I do look at Darius Slay. It's nice to see him start hot. I think that was a point that we made on our last episode talking about the schedule. And I was happy to see, and I know Bradbury, I think, suffered a concussion and he was did not practice status, but I didn't think that he played a poor game. And I know that I said, hey, I think he probably takes a step back this year. So far, I'm 0 for 1 in that in that shot. So I'm happy to say it. The Eagles are 1-0, meaning I'm 0-1 in that shot. But the worst part about the defense, I think, is just, again, it goes back to health, and that was something I questioned throughout the entire episode last week. And Nakobe Dean going on IR is worrisome. I mean, I think that means he misses like about 4 games at least. Yeah, so they call up Morrow, and who was the other linebacker they had signed from the practice squad?
Rashawn Evans. They just signed him from I forgot what practice squad, but yeah, he used to be former first round pick of the Titans.
Okay, so yeah, you got a little bit of depth that you can uncover there, and hopefully it's serviceable by the time Dean comes back. And if he's able to come back earlier, that'll be pretty sick.
Yeah, and Christian Ellison, I thought, did a fine job. When he did come in, he wasn't the issue that presented itself on the defense at times. And I do agree, Slay had a good game. I think that Bradbury played a fine game as well. When you look at where the Patriots really got the Eagles, and they ran their own vanilla scheme as well, except the kind that they ran was one that is just a much more generally productive vanilla scheme than what the Eagles schemed on offense. So they're running a lot of slant routes. They moved Kendrick Bourne into the slot. You're working him over the middle, and he feasted against the Eagles. And that's not just against Avonte Maddox. That doesn't mean that just because he's in the slot, he's going up against the slot corner every time. They took advantage of holes in the zone defense. They were able to slip in Bourne against some of the weaker safeties that the Eagles have. I think Reed Blankenship did a solid job. He's not the only safety out there, although it seemed like it at times. And then also just going up against linebackers who cannot cover a guy like Kendrick Bourne, who isn't the most herald of wide receivers, but has earned a certain monicum of respect. I would say, it's a guy that you have to respect a bit in the defensive scheme. So to see that kind of scheme going up against the defense, that's the kind of worry going forward is how do you solidify that middle of the defense? Can any of these linebackers they brought in help slow that? I'm not overly sure about that. I think that's more so when you're talking about either more snaps for Sidney Brown or you're talking about bringing in another safety still. I think that's more so how you solve that problem. Or again, just game planning as well. And they had talked about James Bradbury playing the slot coming into the year. I think that's something that once he does come back, you will see more of, and possibly Maddox even dropping back into safety coverage. So there's a lot of possibilities at that point. That's what the time after week 1 is. That's when you take time to reflect, look at the possibilities, look at the options that you have going into the rest of the season, how you're going to address these schemes, because every other team in the league saw what New England did, and that was run this vanilla slant scheme all over the Eagles. And Mac Jones and Kendrick Bourne, looked like a incredible tandem when we know in reality that they are fine players, but not much more. So you want to see the Eagles, if they are going to run a kind of vanilla scheme, if it's another, similar condition game, do something a little more in line with that. The question that comes up is that something that Jalen Hurts can run? Because there have been questions about his throws over the middle in the past. Based on what we saw last year, I would say that I have no concerns over it because he proved to be all that and more. But you can't, if you're going to run a vanilla scheme, you have to run one where you're at least getting guys open for yak yardage, which is exactly what New England did. So hopefully they can learn from both sides from this game, move forward. That's what I'm looking to do personally. There were a lot of good things I saw from this young defense, especially, when you're looking up front. Milton Williams was a monster. Can we talk about Milton Williams too?
Yeah, that was fantastic.
I mean, he does not get enough praise. Like
that rotation that they had going on was spot on. Like the rotation was so spot on.
It was fun.
And all these guys are so young too, and even the vets. I mean, Brandon Graham's playing his heart out as always. Fletcher Cox, listen, I'm going to say this. This is week 1. Fletcher Cox looked about as engaged as almost a postseason game. I mean, that dude was in it. Like, there's been people in the past who have talked about effort level and things like that with Fletcher Cox. He brought it, and it's a shame that he had to leave the game hurt. Looks like he'll possibly be back for week 2. I don't see any reason why not. He was a limited participant today in practice. But listen, that man was engaged this past Sunday. I want to see some more of that Thursday, assuming that he plays. But you have to look at the whole entire unit on both sides. I'd say it was a fine performance, but the defense definitely grades out higher than the offense.
And then to kind of go back a little second to the safety situation, I think that's such a bigger concern than the linebacker situation, even with the Kobe Dean out. I mean, you saw how the Patriots were picking apart the safeties most of the time. I mean, that touchdown to Kendrick Bourne, where Justin Evans kind of hesitated as to who he was going to actually help out, was a big reason as to why the Eagles need. It's either one way or another, right? You're either going to fail with a rookie like Sidney Brown, or you're going to succeed with an actual good safety, not Justin Evans. It's not any shade against him, but he's just not who they need at that position right now. This is a Super Bowl team. So once again, if you're going to fail with the rookie. If you're going to succeed with a guy that you trade for, whether it's a Winfield or Buda Baker, whatever case may be. Like you need somebody back there. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was doing things back there. He led the NFL interceptions. I mean, tied for whatever case may be, but he was doing the dirty work out back there. So that's to me, that's the biggest cause for concern facing the Vikings on Thursday right now.
But the thing that, and I'm not saying that you're saying this, Brian, but the thing too is that Sidney Brown might not fail. That's something that has to be considered. You're absolutely right. You have to be willing to fail with Sidney Brown if you're not going to upgrade the position. But failing with Brown is better than what is also failing with the current safety lineup. And Reed Blankenship has done very well so far. He also did really well last year as a rookie. Let's not forget that. Yes. So Sidney Brown, I think, should be the move going forward. They're going to get him more and more snaps. I wonder if they're trying to watch it early on because he is a quality special teams player as well, and they want to find that balance. But, man, I don't see how this current safety group, the starters at least, stay how it's currently lined up on the depth chart for much longer because it was a rough game one.
It's going to be dangerous. It's going to be you're playing with fire if you keep Justin Evans back there. You're playing with fire.
Yeah, it's a matter of what we were talking about just before we went live, where I made the ridiculous comparison, but kind of I challenge you guys to kind of really find the lie here. I mean, did Mac Jones kind of look like Andy Dalton last year when Andy Dalton was pretty much throwing everything? I mean, how much of a result wise when you look at the paper, you look at completions and how the high percentage of that and the touchdowns and the yardage. At the end of the day, the secondary and the adjustments made, because that does go a long way. It reminded me of a little bit of Gannon, and I don't like that whatsoever. I think then he's kind of still figuring out what he has on that defense. I think that the defensive line play was even bland. It just that's raw pressure. From what you saw, he finally got a sack on Mac Jones late in the second half. As far as all that is concerned, I think you guys make a great point with choosing to fail now or to see if sink or swim, if you will, with a rookie. I also like the way that the veterans are picking up the younger players, and those were the two plays that we saw on special teams from Brown, from Job, and when Job was about to get a hype, Cox, made the good leadership play there. So I like that. I can see that a young defense that has the veterans really showing them the way to the point where I don't think any of this conversation is going to be such an issue probably by week 6, week 7, once the schedule really kind of thickens out.
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
I do agree with that as well. I'm looking at a couple of these comments here, and Ron K brings up Sidney Brown talking about how he could be an amazing box safety. I think that's absolutely true. He definitely has all that talent in the world. What I've also seen is that, and I'm not saying you were saying this, Ron, we also can't limit him to that because in coverage, you saw some things, the athletic ability, the instincts. This is a guy who could be an incredible box safety, but also could be a solid dude in coverage as well. That's something that I think we don't want to. This is going to be a steal of a pick. I've been a Sidney Brown guy for a while. I think this is going to be a steal of a pick for Philadelphia. I think you're looking at a long-time staple in the safety position for Philadelphia here. I love Sidney Brown. I think he will be an amazing box safety, Ron. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that he's a guy who he's not going to be limited just to that role either, like Terrell Edmonds, for instance, looking at a guy like that. But then also ducking up and listen. Let's not talk about refs, but let's talk about refs, right? How many refs does it take to call a holding penalty? Can we talk about that for a second?
Sometimes one, sometimes 5.
My goodness.
We need to think about this, guys. The NFL has been paying the refs to look the other way against the Eagles for the longest time. Okay, since the Super Bowl, we know this for it to be a fact.
Yeah. Well, I know it feels as though it kind of evened out as the game went on, and there, to the refs' credit, there was that, and it was obvious. So give them a little bit of credit. It wasn't, I was even saying, to my family when I was watching the game with them, they talk about a call being a good call, and if it's a clear and obvious call, it's not a good call. It was the right call. A good call is one that's hard to see, and you made the call, the right call, regardless. A clear and obvious call is the right call. You don't get points for making a clear and obvious call. The Lane Johnson one was a clear and obvious call, but it's just not called that often. You know.
So you don't get points for doing your job. You get points only for going above and beyond of doing your job.
Listen, hey, that's how corporate America works, and that's how we work on Flipping the Birds, baby. Okay.
You're right, because if I was a official in the NBA, there would be like at the end of the game, it would be like 10 points because I would just call traveling every single time.
Yeah, and listen,
no one would get downside
because
court.
LeBron takes 45 steps to the basket. Yeah, you made the right call, but can you say it was a good call? No, it was an obvious call. You know, like
Euro step.
You did your job, sir. You did your job, good sir.
Yes, and we thank you for it. And this is why you're here, is because you're doing your job, okay? And listen, if you want to say that this is a guy who always makes the right call, then you can talk about that being a good job because you're showing consistency. Consistency is good. An obvious holding penalty, like a guy gets yanked to the ground, as we saw several times in Sunday's game, that is not a good call. That is the right call. So that's my little rant for the week.
Okay. I'm taking your rant to work with me,
like
bro.
A bad call. I keep going back to that. What was it? Rams Saints game. It was like Roby Coleman who just completely smeared the wide receiver and like nothing was called.
Bro, that is the most scripted play I've ever seen in my life.
That was the most asinine thing I've ever seen. I was like, actually, since like. I would have been offended if they called that because it's way funnier that they did it. You know, like it's heartbreaking. I get it. Like I do. It's about as heartbreaking as when the Eagles played the Cowboys and there was only a gangrene colored jersey on the football, but they gave the ball to the Cowboys on the fumble.
I will never forget that.
Dude, it was nuts. Sometimes there's just no rules. I don't know why we have refs.
Exactly.
I was
Might as well
letting
just
the
have
oxygen
robots.
get back to my brain, so I might have missed something. But did we talk about the Miles Sanders kick return helmet yank? Did we acknowledge that too?
No, and the Dallas Goedert yank from last season too that cost them the game.
These are things that it's like, how do you miss that? And you really do get into that kind of scripted conversation.
Can we check your FanDuel, sir?
yeah, honestly, like
run your DraftKings, please.
There's these videos, you know, everyone's seen them, I'm sure, you know, of that is like a jeer that people are saying to refs, like NBA games, NFL, so on and so forth. Like, you know, that is something you hear. And then you look at the NBA and you look at Eric Lewis, who mysteriously retires after an investigation because his family's posting Boston Celtics fan posts nonstop, and you have him cringing in the middle of a Celtics game. Like we people talk about how you forget that refs are people too, but it goes both ways. Let's be honest. You know, refs are people too, so we can't treat them like they're subhuman. But at the same time, like these are people who more often than not enjoy the sport that they are reffing. And so, yeah, personal bias does leak in. Personal bias is everywhere. There is no one who is you know, truly bias free. When you look in the media, it's there. When you look at players, you know, in the game, it's there. Teams, it's there. Refs, it's there. Fans, it's obviously there. So to say that it's not there for refs is honestly ludicrous. Whether or not there are a bunch of Pats fans reffing the game, I don't think it's something like that. But, you know, it is something that does impact the game to a degree, and it's up to the league to handle that properly. You know, and when I say properly, I don't mean, you know, mutually parting ways via retirement, you know, like some other leagues are doing out there.
Just say you retired,
it's something
Eric.
that
Just
hopefully gets solved in time. You know, Ron talks about more stuff getting turned over to technology. That's the baseball route, you know. And the thing that I think that's hard to do with football. There, even if you're not a robot ump guy, being able to challenge calls is something that you should absolutely be able to do, because we look and we see some terrible calls that are very easy to, you know, verify and turn the other way. That's something that, and maybe as the years go on, they do change that. But then again, baseball is not the most progressive sport. So we'll see. But it's not a baseball podcast. This is a football podcast specifically about the Philadelphia Eagles. So why don't we take a look into Thursday night's game against Minnesota At
I was
long
just
last.
about to bring it to boxing real quick, but go ahead.
Yeah, Eric was about to take us off the rails.
Listen, we can talk about polo. I got an email asking if I wanted to cover a polo event.
No,
in
it was just
Philadelphia,
very quickly since you brought up the referee that was like making his facial expression like cringes with the Celtics game. I know you and I sent
I know.
memes
I
to
already
each
know where you're
other.
going.
So like you saw the referee that was doing the boxing match, and when the guy gets punched, he's like, "Ooh." Yeah, dude. Like that is exactly what I what I picture in my head. Like I know I saw the video that you're talking about too, but like it's so egregious. It's
Wasn't there
he
like a
wasn't even trying
referee?
to hide it.
Wasn't there a referee in football where he was like super overexcited about a first down that Tom Brady got?
I think
I'm
so. I
sure.
think
Where
like
he was
Sean
like
or something like that. Weird.
like just super into it.
I don't know. Maybe I added that one in there for some pizzazz. But like you were saying, Zach, I shouldn't have derailed it. Let's go talk about the Eagles and Vikings.
So Eagles take on Vikings Thursday night football. Justin Jefferson's coming off a game where he had 150 receiving yards. But the Vikings offensive line looks just as bad as they could possibly look at the wrong time, where you have a Jordan Davis, you have a Jalen Carter, you have a possible Fletcher Cox, Hassan Reddick. The list goes on, right? We know what's going to happen with stupid white suit.
I
What the
saw
hell is
Zach
Zach saying
laughing. I'm
about
like,
me?
you finally saw the comment.
Wait, hold on, Duck. Wait, I have to read his comment for the listeners on the audio version.
That's right,
So-
for the listeners.
So Doug puts in the chat, Zach, I can only imagine you're wearing a stupid white suit eating cucumber sandwiches.
I don't even know what that's referencing. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be in this scenario.
That's
mean,
quite the
it sounds
imagination.
refreshing as hell, if I'm being honest with you. And if Michael Rubin wants to invite me to one of his all-white suit parties, all-white parties, I should say, I'll show up in a suit. I don't care. Like, and maybe there will be cucumber sandwiches. We don't know. You know,
Is this a reference to you like being a referee, or is this a reference to something completely off the rails?
Polo comment.
Okay,
Yes,
polo. There we go.
I already see. That's the thing. I already dismissed the notion of me covering this polo event. So yes, it makes all the sense in the world now, Duck. Yes. I was actually hoping it was going to be a water polo event because that would be a little more exciting. But unfortunately, it is not a water polo event in the middle of Philadelphia. So.
Would you bring the cucumber sandwich into water?
Probably, yeah. I mean, that's just. I mean, it's already. What's the water going to do? Get more wet from the cucumbers, or vice versa? Like, no, it's fine.
Fair.
Wait, did you say the water is going to get more wet from the cucumbers?
Yeah, from the cucumbers. Like, yeah. What's the worst that's going to happen? I'll be playing water polo, munching on a cucumber sando with the other hand.
No one likes the soggy cucumber.
Great time.
So Doug is helping us bring it back to the Vikings, right? The only worst offensive line, worse than the Vikings, was the Giants. Which let's not talk about the Giants because they got blown the hell out.
Let's not talk about the Giants because Brian's too. The wounds are too fresh. So we can't talk about them.
Did they score any points? Did they know?
Dude,
what was the score? 40-0.
Yeah, I think it was a nice round number on both ends.
Shellacking,
so
mollywhopping. It was horrendous.
We're completely off the rails.
0 is a lack of a number.
But my question is this: How is it possible that Zach Wilson willed the Jets to win against the Bills, but your franchise quarterback Daniel Jones couldn't will the offense to score one touchdown? Yeah, you couldn't assign. You couldn't extend your running back. That's the actual face of the franchise.
Yeah, I mean, well, first and foremost, let's just call it what it is, get it out of the way. Cowboys are a very, very talented team. The defense is a very talented defense. We know this. This is not new information. The offense is good. The defense is much better. We know that. And against just pitiful attempt by the Giants. Oh my goodness! I remember I started watching the game, and I'm watching Daniel Jones, work his way down. Down the field there, and I'm thinking, oh, is this? Because I had just written, I didn't publish the article, but I had just written part of an article about the game, and in it, what I stated was, big money will not change Daniel Jones, not in terms of his personality, but he's still going to be the same mediocre quarterback that he was.
He's still going to suck.
I'm thinking, wow, was I wrong about this? Is Daniel Jones, now that he got paid, is he a legitimate quarterback now? And then once the kick gets blocked, all the wheels fall off the bus, and it's a living hell for the rest of the game for New York Giants fans. I mean, just my goodness, what a horrendous effort. I have never seen a team play that badly professionally. And the Eagles haven't always been great, so let's remember that. But that was a horrendous game. And let me say this too, real quick, okay? And then I'll let you guys get your looks in about the Giants. I had a 99% chance victory in our PSN Fantasy League. 99% chance that was sealed up. No one else had any players left except I had Graham Gano as my kicker. All I needed was Graham Gano to get me 2 points. And that's exactly what he did, except he got me negative 2 points. And I lost that week all because of Graham Gano.
I didn't watch the whole game. How did you get -2?
I turned it off at halftime.
Missed kicks are I found out after the game, but missed kicks are minus points in our league. So guys, look for that for the rest of the season. Good to know now, because it does make a difference. Okay?
My kicker doesn't miss. It's Mr. Jake Elliott. He never misses.
I got Dicker to kick.
I thought Graham Gano was your kicker because he plays with the Giants, but I guess I was mistaken.
No, he had to switch it up.
Anyways,
far be it for me to ever trust a Giants player ever in fantasy. That's my best advice that I can give you guys is not to trust a single one of them because they'll just break your heart.
I co-signed that.
As Brian well knows.
I co-signed that because I have Darren Waller and he got me like maybe 6 points.
He played?
Yep.
Yeah, I guess. I don't
Was
know.
he on the injury report?
I really fell asleep.
What happened more? Did he have more receptions, or did they say that he looks like LeBron James out there more often? Because that's all that I heard about the game was them talking about him looking like LeBron James athletically out there. And a lot of good it did the Giants in the end, So that's the good news for Eagles fans is that, it looks like those are 2 automatic wins, even if they don't play the starters in the final week of the season. But Dallas admittedly will be a tough matchup, but they're not always going to be as disconnected, the Eagles, that is, as they were in week 1. So skipping ahead over the Vikings, the Cowboys, I think will be a good matchup that the Eagles do have a strong chance against. But moving back to the Minnesota Vikings.
Yes. So
Yes.
offensive line is terrible. Justin Jefferson, I mean, I think the big cause for concern, right? We talked about the safeties. On top of that, you have James Bradbury in concussion protocol, who's probably not going to make the game. We know Justin Jefferson
move him all over the field. That's the biggest.
That's the key thing.
Move Jefferson all over the field.
So is Darius Slay going to follow Justin Jefferson? Is my biggest.
Yeah. He has to shadow him. There's
well,
no way
I said this earlier today. I was talking with somebody about what exactly the game plan is going to be, and admittedly, I have to go back and watch the game film from last year because I cannot recall if he shadowed him or not. I assume that he must have, or the Minnesota Vikings, for whatever reason, did not move Jefferson around the field because, as we all know, Jefferson for the most part was shut down. Now, shut down for him is like 6 receptions, 48 yards. Even still, I think that we'll take that over the alternative,
right.
As it compares to an Eagles victory. So if it is Slay moving around the field, it's not typically his MO, especially with Bradbury possibly missing the game. I think that you probably should see him shadowing, but whether or not, we're just going to have to wait and see come game time.
So now, what's your confidence level with Josh Jobe, Mario Goodrich, Eli Ricks, one of those guys actually playing on the outside? Marcus, I feel like there's no way in hell you're putting Devontae Maddox on the outside, knowing his history.
No. Josh Jobe stock through the roof. I'm fully aboard the Josh Jobe trade. I have been for a while. Lovely guy. I think that his play was underrated. You have enough people who are talking about how the rookie receiver for the Pats, really, and I'm glad that we're finally talking about the things that matter, Ron. Thank you so much for addressing my wet cucumber in the room. But when we talk about the play that effectively decided the game or potentially could have decided the game, there's been in Philadelphia, obviously, some mention of Josh Jobe and the good play that it was. But when you look more nationally, you look at even a lot of people locally, when you look at how it was perceived on television, the focus is less on the hell of a good play that it was by Josh Jobe, and it's more of, you have a young wide receiver, a vet who's going to drag his feet. Yeah, well, the thing of it is you have a corner who's also has enough foresight to know if I push this guy out and not give him a chance, it doesn't matter, because there's no longer any rule about possession being maintained even if they're forced out. So that was clearly the right move by Josh Jobe there. I don't want to say it won the game because I feel like you can never say that about one play.
Oh no, it definitely won the game.
It effectively sealed the game.
Yes, correct.
I'm confident in saying so. Josh Jobe stock all the way through the roof, despite a apparently joke made that in poor taste last year that I made about Mario Goodrich. Not good enough, Rich. But whatever the case, I am actually a big fan of Goodrich. I was in college as well. I think that he's going to be fine. But if we're going with Slay, we're going with Jobe, and then we're going with Maddox against Minnesota, I think that's going to be good enough, though Jordan Addison's probably going to get his as well in addition to Justin Jefferson.
How you feeling, Eric?
I worry about the wide receivers and corners. Obviously, for everything we just talked about, Bradbury probably not being in there, but I think with Jobe, I am most comfortable with him starting outside opposite of Slay, wherever Slay is on the field, because he is the most confident right now after that week one. And you kind of have to ride that hot hand. It's just something you do in sports when the confidence is at a high, doesn't have to be an all-time high, but when it's higher than usual or higher than it was before, you ride that. So I'm interested in obviously how he can perform and maybe even help shut down. But yeah, this is going to be a war of attrition with Slay. Slay and Jefferson is going to be the battle to watch the entire time. I'm confident in the Eagles' defensive line and stopping the run. Kirk Cousins, the way that the Patriots did kind of survive were on short and medium routes. And Kirk Cousins has, and that's kind of his wheelhouse if he's going to have one at all. Again, if the focus is to take Jefferson out of the picture, like Zach said, I think that Addison is going to get some. I think Bourne can even have the opportunity to break open. It all depends on how much they want to try to pick at the younger guys that are going to be playing corner or playing around the slot. But what I think this all comes down to again is we're mostly looking at what is the turnaround time for Hurts to be like Hurts, and it's going back to how Sirianni looks at the preseason. If he were to play a quarter in the third game of the preseason and then had that week and then led into the first week of against the Patriots, would he have looked better? And if the turnaround time is that quick, then he will absolutely look better after a full game where he remains healthy going against the Minnesota Vikings. What I believe is that you see a better performance and a better game plan. Now that Johnson knows that he has heat on him from the city of Philadelphia in his first year. This is heat because we're not used to seeing what on paper should be one of the best offenses in the league come out and really drop a goose egg. I mean, really only 7 points. It's kind of like it's underwhelming. We need to see something out of Swift. And I think I'm sticking by those guns. I really do believe that Philadelphia is the better team, even with the injuries that they're facing right now. Defensively,
did we lose Eric, or was that just me?
Well,
that was just you, Brian.
No. I want to say that the Eagles.
So, okay, we getting.
I want
to
say that the Eagles win, but it's going to be a closer game than it is than the Patriots. They're favored to win, Vegas odds by 7 right now at CBS Sports. I think how 4 is about right.
I like how chill Eric just went away and just kept going about his take and came back normally fine, like nothing was going on.
No, I let you
nothing
know.
was on his end.
Yeah, I think.
I really think it was only you who lost them.
Yeah, I think I just said it pretty plainly that the Eagles are going to win. I think around by 4. That's what I have.
So I'm the only one that lost Eric.
Yeah, you're the only one who lost Eric, dude.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. So that's my
apology.
apology.
Maybe the offense is probably going to turn it around, and then maybe the defensive line is going to be the real hook of the defense. And the biggest shot that the Vikings have is definitely taking over that secondary for the Eagles, because that's going to be the weakest area to target. Besides I really do think that Philadelphia, 4 to 7 points win.
The other thing of it, though, is that, as much as you kind of have to expect, Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, who I think people are still a little bit sleeping on, you have to expect them to kind of get theirs. Two things. One, look at how the Eagles handled the running game against the Patriots. The Vikings aren't running on Philadelphia. That's just not going to happen.
That's how I see it, too.
Second of all, the most important thing in this game, and you saw this with the Vikings game last week, is the turnover game. You have to really watch how this D-line manhandles. And people have been saying this in the chat nonstop, I feel like. This D-line against the Vikings O-line is going to feast. We could be looking at the first strip sack from Jalen Carter this upcoming week. We could be looking at multiple fumbles from Kirk Cousins again. I think he had 2 fumbles last week. And we could be looking at the second week in a row with a defensive scoring play. That's the kind of stuff that has the potential to make or break this game. I wouldn't even say make or break this game, but to break out this game for Philadelphia, to really put this in their control, is that defensive effort and that ability to win the turnover game, because I'm not overly worried about the offense turning it over. I say that right before, of course, we see potentially a turnover-heavy game from Philadelphia, but I just don't think that's going to be the case. But this defense, especially playmakers like Cox, Carter, we saw Darius Slay make a big play himself. You could say Brandon Graham too. Like, the names just don't stop. Josh Sweat's a guy who always gets underrated. Then Jordan Davis, obviously. Milton Williams, we already talked about him and how he's often forgotten. Like, there are so many players who can just absolutely smack that ball right out of Cousins' hands or pick him off right in the middle of the air, because he just that is the problem with what Kirk Cousins does. And it happens a lot on primetime as well. That's just the facts. That's science, baby, is what that is. And so is he going to be able to overcome that on Thursday? I just don't see how he does it against this Eagles defense.
You got any prop bets for this?
Listen, I'm working on the article now. I can go over some stuff if you want to talk.
I have a couple ideas. I don't know if there are specific bets, but what I will say is just some things that didn't happen in week 1. I think we see Goddard get 30-plus yards receiving, which is probably low.
Feeding right off of that, and I do think it might be kind of low because he had over 80, I think, against the Vikings last season, and it's not 1-to-1, obviously, but Dallas Goedert's a great play. When we saw how he wasn't involved in the offense last week, we heard how Sirianni addressed that after the game.
He's getting his touches.
He's getting the touchdown is what he's getting. So I get that Dallas Goedert anytime touchdown for me. That's my big play.
Not only that, but you can tell it's gonna be a heavy Swift game as well. And then my thing is about
I was leaning to his Swift receiving touchdown. I think he's gonna probably a screen or a nice little I don't know, like out of the backfield.
I hope so.
But that's where I would like to see him utilized.
He'll definitely.
I would like to see him utilized too. I think he's going to get more touches. I don't think that they're going to go with a heavy Swift game. I just don't think there's a lot of reason to. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's dealt with injuries in the past. I think this is going to be a fairly comfortable game for Philadelphia. It might feel like a shootout at times, and then that's when you're going to see Swift even more in the pass game, I would hope. But I think that you're going to see kind of a more balanced overall attack from the running backs, which is, I think, what it should be. We shouldn't see Swift getting as many touches as what Gainwell got last week. We should be looking at a more balanced running attack. And again, it's not even just literally running the ball from that backfield, but as we know, Swift getting his touches in the passing game as well. Gainwell being able to do that also. We saw him do that in Memphis. He looked half decent in week 1 in that coverage. They just ran a couple of plays that were designed to go nowhere was the problem. So a little more creativity from the offensive game calling. And yeah, we could be looking at a game where it calms down a lot of people whose nerves are a little bit on edge right now in Philadelphia.
And that's going to be the key ingredient to all this is the running game, in my opinion. Just for simple fact, if you have a decent running game, if you have a decent passing attack, your offense is on the field more than it has to be. So that means you're keeping the ball out of Justin Jefferson's hands on playing offense and playing defense. And the Eagles, when they dominated the time possession, that was it. Like, there was no coming back for other teams, and I feel like that's something that they truly missed in week 1 because of whatever the hell was going on. But I'm in favor with you guys. I feel like this game is definitely going to be one where it's just the Eagles are going to find their footing, and they're going to actually show everybody like, hey, like, no, we're still here. It just, it has to take a little time to knock off the rust.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I want to point out real quick. So Ron bringing up, the preference. I'll phrase this politely. The preference, the tight end screens over running back screens. In this scheme,
I love the Dallas Goddard schemes.
The tight end screen is the screen for this offense. That is it. That is what the offense is built for. The wide receivers aren't built to block for running back screens. The offensive linemen, while they are very athletic, it works a lot better in counters and really just moving guys in the run game as opposed to you can get them out in the second level on a passing play as well, but just utilizing that athleticism, moving those offensive linemen around. Again, I prefer that more so in the counter or the tight end screen game. It's just it hasn't worked so far for Philadelphia. Neither has the wide receiver screen game, which I think is a little bit more by poor design than personnel. But I think Ron's right on both accounts. I think the tight end screen is where it's at for Philadelphia. And
Dallas Goddard always eats with those tight end screens
back into the game. And I want to see Grant Calcaterra doing that as well.
Or your boy Albert O.
On the defensive side of the ball, you got any props over there? I'm thinking that you guys already said it right off the bat with Jalen Carter. I don't know how what the sack over under is, but maybe it's 1.5. I would take I'll probably take the over on that actually.
I would guess that it is actually a good bit. I'm not sure what the current sack number is. I looked earlier when I was writing my piece, and I couldn't find anything on defensive props, at least through DraftKings. Maybe if I search through another site, but I would put that easily probably at 3.5. And I would still take the over.
You would take the over on just Jalen Carter. I'm sorry, not the team sacks. I mean just Jalen.
Jalen Carter sacks. Yeah. No. I'm fully with you. Yes, yeah. Over 1.5 sacks.
1.5.
I would think for Jalen Carter.
Yeah. He's definitely going to eat quicker than people expect him to. He's going to have a bigger impact than people expect him to early on in the season, which is going to be phenomenal to see. But yeah, I mean we're almost about to wrap up. I mean, do you guys? Last year, Eric and Morgan gave their predictions for the Eagles and Vikings.
Yeah, and I did say the Vikings. I had the Vikings winning, and then that did not, that panned out wrong. And Jay Fizzle never forgot about it, and he's already mentioned it a few times. Don't hide now, Jay.
So
yeah, all three of us picked the Vikings, if I remember correctly.
I mean, to be fair, though, it made logical sense then, and I'm kind of going against logical sense because a lot of me does want to say the Vikings again. Like the week one, last year against the Lions, the Eagles, while they scored more points than they did, obviously in this year's week one win, they looked as rusty. Okay, so. Yeah, you had all logic to sit there and say, well, Vikings, they're going to be tough coming in. Jefferson had a monstrous week one last year as well. Every single thing is almost repeating itself, except the fact that I'm not going to let Jay Fizzle tell me for the rest of this year. Yeah, I know he's here. Let him tell me.
I can't see that and not hear the Kermit Patrick Mahomes. I'm here. I can't. Anytime I see that.
So I'm not going to allow him to do it twice, and I think I'm sticking by my whole entire thing was 4 losses, so not yet. We live to see another day 2-0.
What score are you going with?
Vikings will win.
They're gonna smack them on their asses. Listen, I know that seems overconfident, but I really do think that's going to be the case. I think that the Vikes probably put up a couple touchdowns. I don't see why this game isn't. I'm going to go 34-17. Like that's wow. What I'm feeling. And the only reason I say 17, I was initially thinking 34-20, but I think Minnesota is going to feel the pressure to go for 7 more often because the Eagles will pull out to that quick lead. So I'm going 34-17 Birds.
Okay. I'm going to go 34-28 just because I feel like we do take a lead, but I feel like later in the game, garbage time, Vikings make a little run, and it's just too little too late. But I think it's gonna be a game where the defensive line really shines, and we finally see what a Brian Johnson offense looks like. At least the surface of it.
I didn't say the score, but I did say the spread. But Eagles 27-23.
Okay, fair game. All right. Well, damn, it's tomorrow night, so that means we're back on.
No,
Tuesday.
it is not.
No,
This is the
it's not
second time you
tomorrow
said
night.
it. You're a day ahead, buddy.
Damn.
I still got AEW Dynamite to watch,
Hey.
and then we got it the next night.
We've given you the gift of time. We've given you, and he left. He's
No,
back.
I'm here.
We've given you the gift of time. You have a whole nother day now where you can prep and think about what this offense
I
is
don't
gonna
know
look like.
what to do.
If you're not watching
What
it
do I do
tonight,
from now
watch
till then?
Ahsoka on Disney Plus.
So I'm in the middle of episode 4 right now. So I'll watch episode
Okay.
5 after that.
So currently you're on a podcast with us. So you're saying that you have paused this episode in the middle. Am I understanding that correctly?
What?
Who
No.
You said you're
I'm-
in the middle of episode 4?
Episode 4. Episode 5 comes out tonight.
You're on episode 4.
I'm on episode 4. Yes.
Are you have you not finished it, but you've started it?
Yes. I started it today.
That is
I have not
psychotic
finished it.
behavior. That is absolutely psychotic behavior. And listen, I get it. You got a family man, all right? And that's
Thank you.
You got that I don't, so I know I don't get it or whatever the hell you want to say. But that is psychotic behavior to not finish that. Ridiculous. Do better, honestly.
You're psychotic. I get it. You're a family man. That is the best sequence of sentences.
Like I understand, but still, you have no excuses. Sound like my teacher back in the day.
Yeah. Don't you forget it.
That's that school of hard knocks out in New York, man.
Apparently so.
Born and bred, baby. Born and bred.
Right in some borough. I don't know which one, but a borough.
At least it's not Joe Burrow starting on my fantasy team with only 2
Anything
points.
but Joe Burrow, dude. Right now,
My God.
anything but Joe Burrow.
Oh God.
Well, and here's the thing. Here's the encouraging thing about that, right? When you look at the top 4 quarterbacks, I'll just make this real quick. In the NFL, you're talking about Patrick Mahomes, you're talking about Joe Burrow, you're talking about Jalen Hurts, you're talking about Josh Allen, right? Justin Herbert, a distant 5th, I will say. But when you're talking about those guys, look at how they performed in week 1. Patrick Mahomes lost. Joe Burrow lost and looked lost. And then what the hell was Josh Allen? I mean, he looked like he never played quarterback before. So say what you want about Jalen Hurts, but just like Ron just said, he looked better than the rest, and he got something that none of them got, and that was that W.
And I don't think it's any sort of coincidence that those 4 quarterbacks we would all kind of sit there and say, and you can interchange somebody here and there and maybe say that they're not
anyone
top
but
4 in
Mahomes
the
you
league.
can move around for sure.
Right, but I don't think it's any coincidence that those top 4 came into week 1 and looked a little bit lackluster. I just, some played more than others, some didn't play at all in preseason, but at the end of the day, those franchises are worried about health and coming into the season 100%. And those teams did come in. And I actually think that Mahomes played a sharper game than what he did. I think Kadarius Toney was the anchor there.
Mahomes
He was anchored, all right?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Listen, what's the policy on league-wide bans for drops? Like, is that something that the league's going to look into? Like,
You got to ask Nelson Aguilar if you want to know that.
Actually, Nelson Aguilar would be a good source.
Nelson Aguilar and Dorial Green
the
Beckham.
Aguilar rule.
You can call it the Aguilar rule. Hey, also, when you go into when you go into a stadium, the lights can't be on too light or too bright. We can call that the Todd Pinkston rule.
Oh, there you go.
Like that's what we can.
Yeah,
do.
I mean, you could also call it the Kirk Cousins rule if you're talking about it metaphorically.
Oh yeah, metaphorically, like in time. I'm hoping that streak, obviously continues. I mean, we're an Eagles podcast, but without bias, I think it will continue.
Yeah, I think that's fair to assume. He always folds weirdly against the Eagles ever since he left the Commanders.
Against the Eagles and in prime time. Yeah, so
it's just a very
double
odd
whammy
predicament that team finds itself in, where one player like Jefferson can put up astronomical numbers, and then they somehow still find a way to lose and not, complete the task in hand. And here you go. Let's see what they got, but I think Philadelphia will finish.
Completely agree. But yeah, so we'll be back next on Tuesday to preview the next game for the Eagles. Until then, Yeah, so what Monday Night Football? Nice little break, right?
Yeah, long time.
But yeah, we'll preview the game for the Tampa Bay Bucks. Maybe we'll have a guest on to kind of help us preview that game. But yeah, until then, Brian Cameron alongside Eric Reese and Zach Chavalella. Eric did pick the Vikings to win, by the way.
I did not. Go Birds!
Yes, sir.
Flipping the birds.